Genocide. It's unthinkable for most of us, and yet it is one of the terrible things that human beings have done to one another from time immemorial. In 1994, in the African country of Rwanda, the ethnic Hutus slaughtered fellow citizens, neighbors, and people who had even been friends and family because they identified them ethnically as Tutsis. Here to reflect on that time and what's happened since, we welcome Imanzi Kaitari, community leader and member of the Rwandan community in Toronto; Eugene Shimiyimana, professor of French and Francophone literature at McMaster University, genocide survivor and member of the Rwandan community in Hamilton; Chantal Mudahogora, genocide survivor and member of the Rwandan community in Hamilton. She is founder of Baka Youth Ministries, a nonprofit working with young Rwandans. And Alan Thompson is here. He is the editor of Media and Mass Atrocity, the Rwanda Genocide and Beyond. He's a senior fellow at CIGI, the Center for International Governance Innovation, and we are honored to have everybody on our program this evening to review the events of 25 years ago. This is going to be a difficult program, but a necessary program, lest we forget. Sheldon, if you would, start with the graphic, and we will remind everybody of the events of 25 years ago this month. It was on April 6th when the plane carrying the presidents of Burundi and Rwanda was shot down in Kigali, Rwanda, killing everybody aboard. That night, the Rwandan armed forces and extremist Hutu militia set up roadblocks and started going house to house, killing Tutsis and moderate Hutu politicians. Starting on April 7th, and over the course of the next 100 days, an estimated 800,000 to 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by extremist Hutus. An estimated 100,000 to 250,000 women were raped during the 3 months of the genocide. And then in July 1994, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, led by Paul Kagame, captured Kigali in early July, forcing the Hutu government to flee to Zaire, followed by a tide of refugees. About 100 days after it began, the horrific genocide in Rwanda ended. Chantal and Eugene, I want to start with you two. Where were you when the genocide began?
Thank you, Steve. I was in Remera, which is very close to the area where the peacekeepers, the UN peacekeepers, were hosted, the Stadium Amahoro, it's called. I lived in the neighborhood, and I worked for ICRC, which is the International Committee for the Red Cross.
Yes.
And I was in my middle 20s. I was a young mother. My firstborn was 2 years old.
Where were you at the time?
I was in Kigali, close to a Saint Family Church, but I was living close to the bridge where Captain Mbaye died, and I was very young. I was finishing my university, and life was just promising.
How old were you at the time?
I was 26.
26. When you heard that the plane had been shot down, did you think hell was about to be unleashed?
Yes, I did, because we knew a few months, even a couple of years before, the militias have been trained how to kill and kill systematically. The lists have been made. Every household member had to be put on the list, even the youngest child, even a pregnant woman. Everyone in the household has been put on the list. We knew that it was coming, probably not to the magnitude that it happened. And also, we were kind of naive in a way, because seeing what the UNAMIR was around, they had helicopters, they had tanks, they had trucks and military, the boots on the ground. So we felt probably the elites, the people in the politics may be killed, but we felt we will be protected.
By whom?
But usually the UN, there was a heavy presence of the UN, especially in Kigali. And we do know if Kigali has been protected, the countryside could have been protected as well.
Did you think hell was about to be unleashed when that plane was shot down?
Yes, I did. There had been killing rehearsals taking place in the country.
Rehearsals?
Yes.
What did that mean?
It means they practiced how to kill Tutsi to see if no one was going to say anything. They started in Kibirira, in Bugesera, in a place in Kibuye. So they had been killing people, and obviously there was, apart from Antonia Rocatelli, an Italian religious was living in Bugesera who tried to raise awareness. Yeah, nobody did anything. So when the plane was shot, we knew it was over. But we couldn't believe it would go to that level because the UN were there, the RPF was there, and we kind of believed there could be some massacres, but not cleansing, a total cleansing.
Eugene, how did you survive?
That's a tough question, but there is no formula. It's just minute after minute. Every second, the next second, you feel alive this second, but you know the next second you won't be there. It's by accident or by miracle, but I am one of the few who survived from the Hotel de Mille Collines.
Did you hide?
Hiding is the least to say. I would hide in the pit where we used to put garbage. And from there, I went to hide to a neighbor. And then from the neighbor, I couldn't keep me for longer. I came back home in the pit again, in the hen house, and to the neighbor again. And
so just kept moving until
someone took me to the hotel. First of all, to Saint Famille Church, where the priest told my brother and I quote, "I have no hiding place for the Tutsis." And we asked
him. The priest was a Hutu.
He was a Hutu.
Who had no hiding place for the Tutsis.
Yes. And I asked him, we were hungry, we were thirsty. I asked him, could you please at least give us water before we get killed? There was a tape there for water tap, and he said, I have no water for cockroaches.
How did you survive?
That's one of the tough questions actually for any survivors, because really it wasn't about being a hero or being whatever. It's just, I guess it wasn't our time. But for me and my family, we were in Remera, which was not far from the parliament here, where the 600 RPA members were hosted, part of the peace agreement, the peace agreement of Arusha. That RPA have come in Rwanda because they wanted to make a mixed military from the military regime to RPA. So the RPA, which is Rwandan Patriotic Army, which was a wing from Rwandan Patriotic Front. So being in Remera, I'm one of the lucky people who were saved in early days of the genocide. But even then, we did not know anywhere to go. Like Eugene says, I went to my neighbor who was considered my friend. We went to high school together, and my son and I went there to hide because they were active members of militia, and she refused to give us a place to hide. She told us to go back to our home because everybody has to just be on their own. So the first day and the second day, we could connect with what was going on in Kigali, but then the phones were cut off, so we did not know what was happening. We could hear bombs, people screaming, children crying down the street. There were roadblocks everywhere. Our neighbors were actively killing, so we were just waiting inside. Especially on the 7th in the morning, my uncle, who lived on the same street as me, he was burned alive in his car. They made him sit in the car. They burned him. They burned his house. And they said they are coming to get us because I lived at his place as a young girl. So between my uncle and myself, there was a shopping center. When they arrived to the shopping center, they started looting. They destroyed all the stores there. They were taking out liquors and food, rice, and other things. So they were occupied by looting until the night. And usually, during the daytime, we knew that nothing was going to happen. During the daytime, it was tough. Like Eugene says, minute by minute. But nighttime, they will go home. So if you do not die in the night, we knew that at least you have the night and then you can worry about next morning. So to make long story short, we stayed in the house for a few days, but then when RPA came out and started trying to stop the genocide, but at the time there were only 600 men and women in the booths. They were just few. They could only do so much. So they started saving people around the pyramid here, and then they extended their mission to the stadium, and then they came to our area. So our area became a battlefield. But we did not know what was going on. April 10th, we were attacked daytime. They came and threw grenade through our guest room, and it bursted. All the fragments were all over the place. But we were in the corridor. We were told before, you have to stay in the corridor and try to put mattresses to protect the walls in case they threw grenade or stray bullets. So we were staying in the house. That day, the RPA came in our area and started fighting the killers. So it became a battlefield. So they reached our area and they were evacuating everyone. And there were only very few of them. But they were able to stop the killers, to fight the killers, to evacuate people. At that time, we were just billions of people coming from all directions and take care of the wounds, carry the babies on their backs. It was just the most chaotic scenario you can ever imagine. At that time, the fourth, fifth day, I think, my son was severely dehydrated. We did not have food, we did not have water. I did not even know. But when we reached the RPA place, one of the female soldiers looked at him. He was on my back and grabbed him and ran away with him. She mixed some water with some liquid and some powder, and she gave him to drink, and she gave me the remain to give to him. And she asked me if I realized that I was going to lose him on dehydration. I said, I have no idea. And I was also wounded on my leg. I still don't know what happened there. I was profusely bleeding, like, with a train of blood, but it didn't even clue. I did not feel any pain, anything, until somebody says, "Oh, are you shot or what happened?" I said, "Why?" He says, "You're bleeding." I'm like, "Where?" And so your
Do you
mind.
know what it was? Were you in fact shot?
I think as we were going, we were crawling, because they were shooting in all directions. So we were crawling. They were all kind of things that which could have injured me, but I never realized what it was.
And this person saved your son, presumably.
She did.
She did.
Yeah.
Imanzi, how old were you when the genocide began?
I was about 8 years old.
And where were you?
I was here in Toronto. My parents immigrated to Toronto in the mid-'80s. And at that time, I was still in elementary school. And what I could remember and what I could take away from that time was that there was a deep sense of shock and anxiousness. I quickly learned at that young age that the world is an evil place. My parents tried as best as possible to shelter my brother and I, but they realized that they needed to expose what was going on. In a sense of shock, knowing that we were here in Toronto, in Canada, as with many other Rwandan families, but they felt helpless. It was hard to get information. I would see my dad just trying to get the word out, being interviewed on many different media outlets, trying to get the political engagement, trying to get the humanitarian engagement, and information was being scattered all over the place. And so, anytime there was a phone ringing, you could sense that anxiousness in realizing, where, if any of our family was affected. And unfortunately, on my dad's side, there's quite a number of family members that were affected and that were killed.
Tell us about that. How many?
So out of family of 5, my dad, there's left remaining 2. So he lost his siblings, and actually even before '94, because this genocide happened sort of pre-'94 also as well, and that it was systemic going on throughout the years. And so everyone thought, I remember as a young kid, just hearing about what was going on, and at that time people were trying to either to send money back home to help out loved ones. And I remember being in those meetings here and people were just trying to help out as best that they can. But
Your father lost his siblings.
yeah, father lost his siblings during that time, and then he had to go back in about 98 after the genocide had ended to go and help and rebuild and help out some of the family members that were there.
Eugene, family members that you lost?
A lot. I lost many family members, including my father, my brothers, my nephews, my nieces, and obviously my fiancé, my uncles, many people. But in the life of a survivor, each person is an emptiness in our lives. Because most of them, we didn't even have a chance to bury them, so there's no closure. I remember after the genocide, the worst moment was to count the missing. And we didn't know if they were still alive or if they were still running somewhere. So every color, every shirt, everything would make you think it's him. So you would run and find yourself in front of a stranger. So they not only killed people, but they didn't give us the chance to say it's over. Even today, we're still waiting. A miracle could happen. So many people who couldn't bury, who couldn't, are still in the mourning.
Chantal, family members lost?
Yes. My both parents were killed same day, April 10th. The village where I was born, which was not far from Kigali, it was just outskirts of Kigali, they took refuge in one of the local churches, thinking maybe they will be saved there. There were many. There were about up to 5,000 Tutsis in that church. April 10th, they just came and killed everyone. I had a couple of sisters who survived in the bodies at that church. My nephews, nieces, I lost about 4 of them, ranging from 18 months to 80 years old. Then uncles, aunties, colleagues, basically almost everybody.
Alan, you've just come back. You went to Rwanda. How come?
Yeah, I was there for the 25th anniversary commemorations, and when Chantal's talking about the area around Rumera, from the parliament to the stadium, walked that road in an event that they called a Walk to Remember, and retracing those steps with people who were looking back 25 years at those events.
I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up picture number 6, please. Alan, tell us what's going on in that picture.
That's on a street in Gikondo, and I was with Isaac and Violette. They lost their father and their sister on April the 11th on the street in Gikondo, and they know the exact location. Their home was close by. The neighbors could tell them where the killing occurred, and they had been to the memorial site earlier in the day in Nyanza, where they eventually the remains of the father and the sister were buried.
How would you, difficult to characterize the mood of an entire country based on a recent visit 25 years after the fact, but what's your sense about where things are at today in Rwanda?
I mean, I'm always hesitant when you're there as a visitor, right? I've not lived, I've been back and forth a lot. When you're there as a visitor, you take in whatever you can absorb, I guess, from the people around you. So in that march to the stadium, you know, it's very, very somber. There are a lot of people there who are survivors, people who are remembering literally as they're walking those steps. In the stadium itself, it was just a remarkable, the National Soccer Stadium holds about 30,000 people. It was full and became a candlelight vigil, and watching the flicker of those candles lights as it made a sort of a wave around the stadium. And yet blended in with the candles in a nod to modern Rwanda, I guess, people holding up their cell phones with the flashlight on. In that crowd of 30,000, you suddenly realize that's about how many people were probably killed in the first 2, 3, 4 days of those events. That stadium full of people, in a way, could represent those who were killed in the first days.
Imanzi, I want to find out more about the work that you do now with the Rwandan community here in Canada. Tell us about it. What are you doing?
Yeah, so what we found out post-1994 is that there was lots of a need to really educate the young people as to what happened in 1994.
Young people in the community or beyond?
In the community, and also the general public at large. Growing up, in school, people really didn't know about what Rwanda or where Rwanda is and all of that, and so for me, I guess I've always felt that need to always stay grounded to what my identity is, and also how could we pave a better future going forward. And so we have had opportunities where we're bringing young people in to try to how do we reconcile what has happened, and how do we foster? I know there's the saying about never again, and obviously we see mass atrocities still continuing to happening, and how could we reconcile as to what happened? How could we move forward? And so we've had opportunities where we're getting the youth together. How could we build mentorship? How could we partner with other communities that have also gone through similar atrocities, whether it's the Jewish community, Armenian community, and many other communities that have experienced this. Also realizing that intergenerational trauma is a big thing, and that 25 years later, we're seeing the emergence of that, and we're seeing that people are now telling their stories, and which is quite remarkable, and this is something that we want to continue going forward.
Eugene, I would like you to give us a better understanding of how, having been through what you went through 25 years ago and suffered the kinds of losses that you did, how does one pick up, move to Canada, try to start a new life, and move on?
Once again, that's a very tough question. A very tough question, but the principle that led most of us survivors is not to give reason to the killers. What can I do to make them understand that they failed? Is for me to remain alive, and my life, my staying alive, it's a testimony to the failure, and that you cannot just wipe out a people. So after the genocide, I went back to school to finish my BA, and I met a professor from Laval, Josiah Semjanga, to whom who I am today. So he offered me to come here for my master's. So I came for my master's, but it was a pretext for me because I was totally damaged. I was damaged inside, emotionally, intellectually. I was just, I was a working ghost. So coming here was for me a way of connecting with life. So I had, in my mind, I had to get treatment. So I came here and I was very welcomed at Western Ontario. So I did my master's, and then they offered me admission to the PhD program.
Where did you do your master's?
Western.
At Western.
Ontario. Okay. And they got me, I got a chance to do my PhD, and then I reconstructing myself, went through school and health treatment. So here I am, 25 years later. I don't know if I healed totally, but I'm very happy to say I met amazing people who made me trust again in life, trust again in people, to really get convinced life is still possible even after the evil has passed.
Wonderful. How about you, Chantal? How does one put one foot in front of the other and try to create a life after you've been through what you've been through?
Rwandan people are resilient people by nature. The resilience is embedded in our culture. We even have some proverbs which talks about the resilience part. But in our case, we did not have any other choice. We did not die. We have to live. I remember the post-genocide, right after the genocide, when Eugene was talking about, when we were cleaning up the dead, the chaos, the rubbles, trying to bury our own or the mass graves. It was just a chaotic part. And you are wondering, how am I going to continue to live with this kind of loss. But also, I believe in the genocide, we were helpless. So we trained ourselves to die. You have trained your mind to die, and now you have to live. You have to train your mind back that I'm not dead, I have to live.
Have you suffered, you've heard this before, survivor's guilt? Do you suffer?
Absolutely.
You feel that?
Especially my nephew, Crispin. Sorry.
It's okay. How old was Crispin?
18 months. Him and I, his mother, myself, he's my brother's son. Himself and my son, Christian, they were almost same age, like a few months apart. We took refuge in the southern of the country prior to April 1994. We left, I think, end of February 22nd, I believe. We went to Butare, which is the southern of the country, because we always believed that Kigali at the time was really bad. It was going from bad to worse. Grenades every day, riots everywhere, roadblocks everywhere. You go to work, you never know if you're going to come home, and vice versa. So people have already taken refuge in different areas like Centre Christus, which is a Christian Roman Catholic church, or Nyamirambo, Frere Josephite. People have been already taken refuges in different areas, and those people never came home because the genocide started when they were still there and they were killed there. So at that time, it was not safe in Kigali. We would be attacked every night. They would be throwing rocks and stones on our windows and the roofs. They would be like, it just became very, very chaotic. So we went to southern of the country. At that time, I took a few months away from work. I took some holidays to go to the southern. We lived in a congregation which was it was a nuns congregation. I'm not sure if you know the infamous nuns who were convicted of the genocide in Belgium. Kizito and Gertrude. They were the leaders of that congregation. So my sister-in-law and my son and Crispin, who is my nephew, we went there. We stayed a few weeks, hoping that things will calm down in Kigali so we can go back. And my sister-in-law became very sick. And because my kids, both boys, babies were same age, she couldn't breastfeed her son. So I had to breastfeed both of them. She asked me if I could breastfeed for both of them, my son and my nephew.
And you did?
I did. And then when my holidays were over, I had no other choice than going back in Kigali. So I went back to work and I left them behind. I know deep down in my mind that there was nothing I could have done, but the guilt is there.
Because why? What happened?
Because I feel like I abandoned him, because him and my sister-in-law, they were killed, and we survived.
Eugène, reconciliation. How do you feel about the killers today?
I don't know what to say, because reconciliation, it's a very good thing. But when it comes to a personal level, say, who do I reconcile with? They start to give us hard time since before I wasn't even born. I remember my father telling me how our village was burning, how my father going into exile, coming back, etc., etc. How hate was part of how what many people live. So for me, reconciliation, I wish I could have at least one of those who killed my family coming to me, say, I did this, then we can reconcile. Because I cannot reconcile with someone who didn't do anything against me. Mm-hmm. And it's a very political, a good political stand where the government tries to reconstruct the nation. But we have to understand this small country belongs to everybody, to all of us. None has more rights than another. But reconciliation is a good thing, but do we understand it the same way? Because today there are some people who still believe they didn't finish the job.
Alan, when you were just there, how did you gauge the level of a desire for reconciliation by a level of taking responsibility by Hutus for what they did 25 years ago? Talk to us about that.
One thing that's always struck me as an outsider when I'm there is trying to, of course, people don't talk about ethnicity any longer, right? They no longer self-identify as Hutu or Tutsi, even though the exercise of reconciliation does acknowledge that there are these groups that need to reconcile from those events. I'm always struck by a couple things when I'm there. I do wonder what is going through the minds of those who were perpetrators or were the families of perpetrators or were Hutu who know that they did not participate in those events. And so you wonder during this intensive period of commemoration in April, which is marked every year. It's an official, businesses closed, the television, the radio, it's all consuming. And you do wonder, how do those who are not among the victims, how do they deal with this commemoration? And another issue that's very striking is just, you mentioned the intergenerational trauma. The president noted in his speech on April the 7th, now a majority of Rwandans, something like 60% of the population, are under 25. So we mark this 25th anniversary, and a majority of the population did not experience those events directly. And you start to try to piece together, going forward, what does it mean in a country where it's no longer dealing with death, it's trying to figure out the future. And half the population did not experience those events directly. And how do you move forward?
Imanzi, let me get your view on that, because on the one hand, the fact that there are so many people there who did not experience it allows the country to move forward in some ways. On the other hand, you know, you don't want people to forget this. And the fewer people who are still around who remember it, there is that fear. How do you work that out in your head?
Yeah, no, it is, I would say, like a complex. How do we, again, reconcile our past, keep that memory alive, you know, the preservation, so that it doesn't fade into distant memory, because we know that, you know, there are those that purposely want this to fade out and deniers, but at the same time, how do we make that space where this is, you know, inclusive for everyone? And I believe it starts one step at a time, one conversation at a time, one community at a time, and really try to build those bridges. And I think the more that we are talking about and understanding, you know, the trauma that, you know, our parents and our elders faced, you know, while they were growing up, and a lot of it has been entrenched, like, for many years, you know, and it's going to be difficult, you know, but going forward, in order to prevent this, we do need to continually have these conversations. And right now we are starting to see it. Conversations are getting, you know, quite open, and, you know, no one wants to go back to the past. You know, and this is something that we need to be intentional about. And, you know, living here in the diaspora, and young people, and I encounter it daily, you know, we do want to make that place, that safe space where it is open, where we can connect. And this is going to be like the ongoing healing journey, because it won't happen overnight, but it is. We need to be intentional about it.
In our last couple of minutes here, I want to read something that Kumi Naidoo, who's the Secretary General of Amnesty International, had to say on the anniversary of the genocide. It is shameful that the conscience of world leaders is all too often pricked only in the aftermath of massive atrocities. Then, as soon as the news moves on, they go straight back to peddling the hateful and dehumanizing rhetoric that fuels these horrific incidents in the first place. Eugène, Is it possible? Get past is not the right word. No one wants to get past this. But is it possible to put this event in its historic place and try to, I don't know a better way to say it other than to move on and to live on and to try to recreate a new Rwanda? Is that possible to do?
I think it's very possible. It all depends on the will. And I believe this should give us a lesson, especially in what I would call respect of life, because our nation needs people, need not a grave. We need a country that feeds us. I believe if we want to create a new nation, everybody has to bring his contribution. But if people think they have more right to the country than others, then we'll go back. But this genocide should remind us that it didn't just happen in 1994. It started way long before. And I believe it should give us a new start. We cannot leave it behind. It's part of our heritage. Unfortunately, we came from bad things, but I think we can head towards beautiful things.
Chantal, I want to ask you about denial, because more than 75 years ago, the Holocaust began, and people today, and there are obviously survivors of the Holocaust during World War II, there are people who denied it happened. We're only 25 years in the rearview mirror for this. Do you run into denial of this genocide?
Yes, denial is the last stage of the genocide. We went through all the stages, like as Genocide Watch has put it out, the gentleman called Stratton. Right now, we are dealing with a big movement of deniers and their allies and revisionists and negationists, all kind of people. And they are very smart. Sometimes they don't necessarily deny it, but they use narratives to minimize or to jeopardize or trivialize the genocide. So we have groups in Europe, but we also have groups in North America, even in Canada. People try to tell us that genocide never happened. So for survivors, if there's anything which re-victimizes, is someone who looks you in the face and say, by the way, you are lying. What you're saying is not true. But unfortunately, in Canada, we don't even have a registration to go after deniers. Belgium has just voted one, and France has one, Germany has one, but in Canada, we don't have one. We know our history. We don't need any non-Rwandan to come and tell us things never happened the way we say it happened. And plus, in 1994, the whole world abandoned us. We don't need them to come around today to start dividing us again.
Well, one of the reasons that this was allowed to happen 25 years ago is that much of the international media went to sleep. And Alan has a new book out on this very subject. So, Alan, you sit tight, because you and I are going to continue the conversation and look inside that new book of yours. I can't thank you enough for coming in tonight and sharing your memories and your hopes and aspirations. And it was very good of you to do so.
Thank you.
I know it took considerable strength to do so. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.